the new god of dark, the new gods of dark, the new god of dark, the new goddess of dark, the new goddesses of dark, the new goddess of dark, the old god of dark, the old gods of dark, the old god of dark, the old goddess of dark, the old goddesses of dark, the old goddess of dark, the greater god of dark, the greater gods of dark, the greater god of dark, the greater goddess of dark, the greater goddesses of dark, the greater goddess of dark, the lesser god of dark, the lesser gods of dark, the lesser god of dark, the lesser goddess of dark, the lesser goddesses of dark, the lesser goddess of dark, the higher god of dark, the higher gods of dark, the higher god of dark, the higher goddess of dark, the higher goddesses of dark, the higher goddess of dark, the lower god of dark, the lower gods of dark, the lower god of dark, the lower goddess of dark, the lower goddesses of dark, the lower goddess of dark, the greater spirit of dark, the greater spirits of dark, the greater spirit of dark, the lesser spirit of dark, the lesser spirits of dark, the lesser spirit of dark, the higher spirit of dark, the higher spirits of dark, the higher spirit of dark, the lower spirit of dark, the lower spirits of dark, the lower spirit of dark, the major god of dark, the major gods of dark, the major god of dark, the major goddess of dark, the major goddesses of dark, the major goddess of dark, the minor god of dark, the minor gods of dark, the minor god of dark, the minor goddess of dark, the minor goddesses of dark, the minor goddess of dark, the superior god of dark, the superior gods of dark, the superior god of dark, the superior goddess of dark, the superior goddesses of dark, the superior goddess of dark, the inferior god of dark, the inferior gods of dark, the inferior god of dark, the inferior goddess of dark, the inferior goddesses of dark, the inferior goddess of dark, the ancestor god of dark, the ancestor gods of dark, the ancestor god of dark, the ancestor goddess of dark, the ancestor goddesses of dark, the ancestor goddess of dark, the ascendant god of dark, the ascendant gods of dark, the ascendant god of dark, the ascendant goddess of dark, the ascendant goddesses of dark, the ascendant goddess of dark, the descendant god of dark, the descendant gods of dark, the descendant god of dark, the descendant goddess of dark, the descendant goddesses of dark, the descendant goddess of dark, the transcendent god of dark, the transcendent gods of dark, the transcendent god of dark, the transcendent goddess of dark, the transcendent goddesses of dark, the transcendent goddess of dark, the past god of dark, the past gods of dark, the past god of dark, the past goddess of dark, the past goddesses of dark, the past goddess of dark, the present god of dark, the present gods of dark, the present god of dark, the present goddess of dark, the present goddesses of dark, the present goddess of dark, the future god of dark, the future gods of dark, the future god of dark, the future goddess of dark, the future goddesses of dark, the future goddess of dark, the authentic god of dark, the authentic gods of dark, the authentic god of dark, the authentic goddess of dark, the authentic goddesses of dark, the authentic goddess of dark, the synthetic god of dark, the synthetic gods of dark, the synthetic god of dark, the synthetic goddess of dark, the synthetic goddesses of dark, the synthetic goddess of dark, the progressive god of dark, the progressive gods of dark, the progressive god of dark, the progressive goddess of dark, the progressive goddesses of dark, the progressive goddess of dark, the regressive god of dark, the regressive gods of dark, the regressive god of dark, the regressive goddess of dark, the regressive goddesses of dark, the regressive goddess of dark, the ordinary god of dark, the ordinary gods of dark, the ordinary god of dark, the ordinary goddess of dark, the ordinary goddesses of dark, the ordinary goddess of dark, the extraordinary god of dark, the extraordinary gods of dark, the extraordinary god of dark, the extraordinary goddess of dark, the extraordinary goddesses of dark, the extraordinary goddess of dark, the static god of dark, the static gods of dark, the static god of dark, the static goddess of dark, the static goddesses of dark, the static goddess of dark, the dynamic god of dark, the dynamic gods of dark, the dynamic god of dark, the dynamic goddess of dark, the dynamic goddesses of dark, the dynamic goddess of dark, the land god of dark, the land gods of dark, the land god of dark, the land goddess of dark, the land goddesses of dark, the land goddess of dark, the sea god of dark, the sea gods of dark, the sea god of dark, the sea goddess of dark, the sea goddesses of dark, the sea goddess of dark, the sky god of dark, the sky gods of dark, the sky god of dark, the sky goddess of dark, the sky goddesses of dark, the sky goddess of dark, the god of dark, the gods of dark, the god of dark, the goddess of dark, the goddesses of dark, the goddess of dark, the half god of dark, the half gods of dark, the half god of dark, the half goddess of dark, the half goddesses of dark, the half goddess of dark, the vessel of dark, the vessels of dark, the vessel of dark, the name of dark, the names of dark, the name of dark, the person of dark, the persons of dark, the person of dark, the persona of dark, the personas of dark, the persona of dark, the personage of dark, the personages of dark, the personage of dark, the personality of dark, the personalities of dark, the personality of dark, the personification of dark, the personifications of dark, the personification of dark, the image of dark, the images of dark, the image of dark, the imagination of dark, the imaginations of dark, the imagination of dark, the belief of dark, the beliefs of dark, the belief of dark, the thought of dark, the thoughts of dark, the thought of dark, the word of dark, the words of dark, the word of dark, the action of dark, the actions of dark, the action of dark, the reaction of dark, the reactions of dark, the reaction of dark, the feeling of dark, the feelings of dark, the feeling of dark, the situation of dark, the situations of dark, the situation of dark, the circumstance of dark, the circumstances of dark, the circumstance of dark, the environment of dark, the environments of dark, the environment of dark, the relationship of dark, the relationships of dark, the relationship of dark, the number of dark, the numbers of dark, the number of dark, the formula of dark, the formulas of dark, the formula of dark, the equation of dark, the equations of dark, the equation of dark, the theory of dark, the theories of dark, the theory of dark, the symbol of dark, the symbols of dark, the symbol of dark, the color of dark, the colors of dark, the color of dark, the thing of dark, the things of dark, the thing of dark, the way of dark, the ways of dark, the way of dark, the place of dark, the places of dark, the place of dark, the time of dark, the times of dark, the time of dark, the event of dark, the events of dark, the event of dark, the result of dark, the results of dark, the result of dark, the crown of dark, the crowns of dark, the crown of dark, the throne of dark, the thrones of dark, the throne of dark, the dark king, the dark kings, the dark kingdom, the dark kingdoms, the dark king's subject, the dark king's subjects, the dark king's dominion, the dark king's dominions, the kingdom of dark, the kingdoms of dark, the kingdom of dark, the dark queen, the dark queens, the dark queendom, the dark queendoms, the dark queen's subject, the dark queen's subjects, the dark queen's dominion, the dark queen's dominions, the queendom of dark, the queendoms of dark, the queendom of dark, the dark prince, the dark princes, the dark princedom, the dark princedoms, the dark prince's subject, the dark prince's subjects, the dark prince's dominion, the dark prince's dominions, the princedom of dark, the princedoms of dark, the princedom of dark, the dark princess, the dark princesses, the dark princessdom, the dark princessdoms, the dark princess's subject, the dark princess's subjects, The Dark Princess's dominion. The Dark Princess's dominions. The Princessdom of Dark. The Princessdoms of Dark. The Princessdom of Dark. The Lord of Dark. The Lords of Dark. The Lord of Dark. The Lordess of Dark. The Lordesses of Dark. The Lordess of Dark. The Priest of Dark. The Priests of Dark. The Priest of Dark. The Priestess of Dark. The Priestesses of Dark. The Priestess of Dark. The Ritual of Dark. The Rituals of Dark. The Ritual of Dark. The Shrine of Dark. The Shrines of Dark. The Shrine of Dark. The Temple of Dark. The Temples of Dark. The Temple of Dark. The Leader of Dark. The Leaders of Dark. The Leader of Dark. The Follower of Dark. The Followers of Dark. The Follower of Dark. The Natural Substance of Dark. The Natural Substances of Dark. The Natural Substance of Dark. The Supernatural Substance of Dark. The Supernatural Substances of Dark. The Supernatural Substance of Dark. The Temporal Substance of Dark. The Temporal Substances of Dark. The Temporal Substance of Dark. The Spiritual Substance of Dark. The Spiritual Substances of Dark. The Spiritual Substance of Dark. The Natural Form of Dark. The Natural Forms of Dark. The Natural Form of Dark. The Supernatural Form of Dark. The Supernatural Forms of Dark. The Supernatural Form of Dark. The Temporal Form of Dark. The Temporal Forms of Dark. The Temporal Form of Dark. The Spiritual Form of Dark. The Spiritual Forms of Dark. The Spiritual Form of Dark. The Age of Dark. The Ages of Dark. The Age of Dark. The Era of Dark. The Heiress of Dark. The Era of Dark. The Awakener of Dark. The Awakeners of Dark. The Awakener of Dark. The Awakening of Dark. The Awakenings of Dark. The Awakening of Dark. The Realm of Dark. The Realms of Dark. The Realm of Dark. The Dimension of Dark. The Dimensions of Dark. The Dimension of Dark. The Zone of Dark. The Zones of Dark. The Zone of Dark. The Frequency of Dark. The Frequencies of Dark. The Frequency of Dark. The Century of Dark. The Centuries of Dark. The Century of Dark. The Millennium of Dark. The Millenniums of Dark. The Millennium of Dark. The Purpose of Dark. The Purposes of Dark. The Purpose of Dark. The Meaning of Dark. The Meanings of Dark. The Meaning of Dark. The Culture of Dark. The Cultures of Dark. The Culture of Dark. The Demonstrator of Dark. The Demonstrators of Dark. The Demonstrator of Dark. The Demonstration of Dark. The Demonstrations of Dark. The Demonstration of Dark. The Manifester of Dark. The Manifestors of Dark. The Manifester of Dark. The Manifestation of Dark. The Manifestations of Dark. The Manifestation of Dark. The Presence of Dark. The Presences of Dark. The Presence of Dark. The Glow of Dark. The Glows of Dark. The Glow of Dark. The Goal of Dark. The Goals of Dark. The Goal of Dark. The Plan of Dark. The Plans of Dark. The Plan of Dark. The Book of Dark. The Books of Dark. The Book of Dark. The Philosopher of Dark. The Philosophers of Dark. The Philosopher of Dark. The Philosophy of Dark. The Philosophies of Dark. The Philosophy of Dark. The Releaser of Dark. The Releasers of Dark. The Releaser of Dark. The Release of Dark. The Releases of Dark. The Release of Dark. The Variable of Dark. The Variables of Dark. The Variable of Dark. The Cause of Dark. The Causes of Dark. The Cause of Dark. The Effect of Dark. The Effects of Dark. The Effect of Dark. The Journey of Dark. The Journeys of Dark. The Journey of Dark. The Emergence of Dark. The Emergences of Dark. The Emergence of Dark. The Source of Dark. The Sources of Dark. The Source of Dark. The Originator of Dark. The Originators of Dark. The Originator of Dark. The Origin of Dark. The Origins of Dark. The Origin of Dark. The Forefather of Dark. The Forefathers of Dark. The Forefather of Dark. The Foremother of Dark. The Foremothers of Dark. The Foremother of Dark. The Ancestor of Dark. The Ancestors of Dark. The Ancestor of Dark. The Descendant of Dark. The Descendants of Dark. The Descendant of Dark. The Lineage of Dark. The Lineages of Dark. The Lineage of Dark. The Heritage of Dark. The Heritages of Dark. The Heritage of Dark. The Heir of Dark. The Heirs of Dark. the heir of dark, the co-heir of dark, the co-heirs of dark, the co-heir of dark, the joint heir of dark, the joint heirs of dark, the joint heir of dark, the dynasty of dark, the dynasties of dark, the dynasty of dark, the force of dark, the forces of dark, the force of dark, the law of dark, the laws of dark, the law of dark, the pact of dark, the pacts of dark, the pact of dark, the game of dark, the games of dark, the game of dark, the mask of dark, the masks of dark, the mask of dark, the armor of dark, the armors of dark, the armor of dark, the sword of dark, the swords of dark, the sword of dark, the shield of dark, the shields of dark, the shield of dark, the force shield of dark, the force shields of dark, the force shield of dark, the armored force shield of dark, the armored force shields of dark, the armored force shield of dark, the champion of dark, the champions of dark, the champion of dark, the guardian of dark, the guardians of dark, the guardian of dark, the defender of dark, the defenders of dark, the defender of dark, the protector of dark, the protectors of dark, the protector of dark, the chant of dark, the chants of dark, the chant of dark, the shape of dark, the shapes of dark, the shape of dark, the cube of dark, the cubes of dark, the cube of dark, the cuboid of dark, the cuboids of dark, the cuboid of dark, the sphere of dark, the spheres of dark, the sphere of dark, the spheroid of dark, the spheroids of dark, the spheroid of dark, the prism of dark, the prisms of dark, the prism of dark, the pyramid of dark, the pyramids of dark, the pyramid of dark, the cylinder of dark, the cylinders of dark, the cylinder of dark, the cone of dark, the cones of dark, the cone of dark, the triangle of dark, the triangles of dark, the triangle of dark, the circle of dark, the circles of dark, the circle of dark, the semicircle of dark, the semicircles of dark, the semicircle of dark, the square of dark, the squares of dark, the square of dark, the rectangle of dark, the rectangles of dark, the rectangle of dark, the parallelogram of dark, the parallelograms of dark, the parallelogram of dark, the rhombus of dark, the rhombuses of dark, the rhombus of dark, the trapezoid of dark, the trapezoids of dark, the trapezoid of dark, the polygon of dark, the polygons of dark, the polygon of dark, the pentagon of dark, the pentagons of dark, the pentagon of dark, the hexagon of dark, the hexagons of dark, the hexagon of dark, the septagon of dark, the septagons of dark, the septagon of dark, the octagon of dark, the octagons of dark, the octagon of dark, the nonagon of dark, the nonagons of dark, the nonagon of dark, the decagon of dark, the decagons of dark, the decagon of dark, the evolution of dark, the evolutions of dark, the evolution of dark, the revolution of dark, the revolutions of dark, the revolution of dark, the elemental art of dark, the elemental arts of dark, the elemental art of dark, the elemental science of dark, the elemental sciences of dark, the elemental science of dark, the elemental principle of dark, the elemental principles of dark, the elemental principle of dark, the elemental technology of dark, the elemental technologies of dark, the elemental technology of dark, the low elemental art of dark, the low elemental arts of dark, the low elemental art of dark, the low elemental science of dark, the low elemental sciences of dark, the low elemental science of dark, the low elemental principle of dark, the low elemental principles of dark, the low elemental principle of dark, the low elemental technology of dark, the low elemental technologies of dark, the low elemental technology of dark, the high elemental art of dark, the high elemental arts of dark, the high elemental art of dark, the high elemental science of dark, the high elemental sciences of dark, the high elemental science of dark, the high elemental principle of dark, the high elemental principles of dark, the high elemental principle of dark, the high elemental technology of dark, the high elemental technologies of dark, the high elemental technology of dark, the agent of dark, the agents of dark, the agent of dark, the agency of dark, the agencies of dark, the agency of dark, the amplifier of dark, the amplifiers of dark, the amplifier of dark, the amplification of dark, the amplifications of dark, the amplification of dark, the enhancer of dark, the enhancers of dark, the enhancer of dark, the enhancement of dark, the enhancements of dark, the enhancement of dark, the magnifier of dark, the magnifiers of dark, the magnifier of dark, the magnification of dark, the magnifications of dark, the magnification of dark, the influencer of dark, the influencers of dark, the influencer of dark, the influence of dark, the influences of dark, the influence of dark, the emanator of dark, the emanators of dark, the emanator of dark, the emanation of dark, the emanations of dark, the emanation of dark, the converger of dark, the convergers of dark, the converger of dark, the convergence of dark, the convergences of dark, the convergence of dark, the aura of dark, the auras of dark, the aura of dark, the impression of dark, the impressions of dark, the impression of dark, the intelligence of dark, the intelligences of dark, the intelligence of dark, the sophistication of dark, the sophistications of dark, the sophistication of dark, the genius of dark, the geniuses of dark, the genius of dark, the polymath of dark, the polymaths of dark, the polymath of dark, the psychic of dark, the psychics of dark, the psychic of dark, the knowledge of dark, the knowledges of dark, the knowledge of dark, the understanding of dark, the understandings of dark, the understanding of dark, the wisdom of dark, the wisdoms of dark, the wisdom of dark, the secret of dark, the secrets of dark, the secret of dark, the mystery of dark, the mysteries of dark, the mystery of dark, the revelation of dark, the revelations of dark, the revelation of dark, the tactic of dark, the tactics of dark, the tactic of dark, the strategy of dark, the strategies of dark, the strategy of dark, the strength of dark, the strengths of dark, the strength of dark, the might of dark, the mights of dark, the might of dark, the power of dark, the powers of dark, the power of dark, the authority of dark, the authorities of dark, the authority of dark, the dominion of dark, the dominions of dark, the dominion of dark, the rhythm of dark, the rhythms of dark, the rhythm of dark, the melody of dark, the melodies of dark, the melody of dark, the music of dark, the musics of dark, the music of dark, the lyric of dark, the lyrics of dark, the lyric of dark, the song of dark, the songs of dark, the song of dark, the dance of dark, the dances of dark, the dance of dark, the spirit of dark, the spirits of dark, the spirit of dark, the soul of dark, the souls of dark, the soul of dark, the body of dark, the bodies of dark, the body of dark, the mark of dark, the marks of dark, the mark of dark, the promise of dark, the promises of dark, the promise of dark, the visionary of dark, the visionaries of dark, the visionary of dark, the vision of dark, the visions of dark, the vision of dark, the picture of dark, the pictures of dark, the picture of dark, the sound of dark, the sounds of dark, the sound of dark, the tongue of dark, the tongues of dark, the tongue of dark, the language of dark, the languages of dark, the language of dark, the communication of dark, the communications of dark, the communication of dark, the people of dark, the peoples of dark, the people of dark, the society of dark, the societies of dark, the society of dark, the fortress of dark, the fortresses of dark, the fortress of dark, the government of dark, the governments of dark, the government of dark, the city of dark, the cities of dark, the city of dark, the nation of dark, the nations of dark, the nation of dark, the civilization of dark, the civilizations of dark, the civilization of dark, the world of dark, the worlds of dark, the world of dark,